The Showtime series The Borgias was considered one of the most scandalous shows on premium cable. Poison, murder, scheming popes, family members in bed together. People watched it and thought, wow, they really pushed the envelope here. Jeremy Irons, chewing scenery as Pope Alexander VI, bodies dropping left and right, political backstabbing in every episode. Surely this was an exaggerated, dramatized, Hollywoodified version of what actually happened in Renaissance Italy. Right? The show must have cranked the dial to 11 for entertainment value. That is what most people believe. And most people are dead wrong. The truth is the opposite. Showtime turned the dial down. Way down. Because the real Borgia family was so depraved, so shamelessly corrupt, so cartoonishly evil, that if the writers had put the actual historical record on screen, audiences would have rejected it as unrealistic. The real Borgias made their fictional counterparts look like a family of Sunday school teachers. Let's start with what people think they know. The Borgias ran for 3 seasons, from 2011 to 2013. It depicted Rodrigo Borgia's rise to the papacy, his ruthless children Cesare and Lucrezia, and the web of corruption they spun across Italy. The show included assassinations, bribery of cardinals, and yes, a slowly building romantic tension between Cesare and Lucrezia that made audiences deeply uncomfortable. Critics praised it for its boldness. Viewers called it shocking. And showrunner Neil Jordan, the Oscar-winning filmmaker, talked openly about the challenge of depicting such dark material for television. But here's the thing, Jordan and his writers actually left out the worst of it. They softened timelines, combined events, and in many cases just flat-out skipped episodes from the historical record that were too extreme even for a premium cable audience that had already accepted Game of Thrones. The show gave you a Renaissance political thriller. The Real Family gave history a horror story with a body count that would make a slasher franchise jealous. One of the most famous aspects of the Borgia legend is their use of poison, and the show does depict this. You see characters slipping substances into wine, using poison-tipped rings, the classic stuff. It makes for great television. But the real Borgia poison operation was allegedly an industrial-scale enterprise. Contemporary sources describe a substance called Cantarella. Nobody today knows exactly what it was. Some historians believe it was a form of arsenic, possibly white arsenic mixed with other compounds. Others have speculated it contained phosphorus. What the sources do agree on is that the Borgias supposedly perfected it to a terrifying degree. They could allegedly calibrate dosages so precisely that they could choose not just whether someone would die, but when. Need a cardinal to drop dead at dinner? Done. Need a wealthy bishop to sicken slowly over 3 weeks, so his death looks natural while you quietly redirect his wealth? Also done. Rodrigo as Pope Alexander VI and his son Cesare reportedly used Cantarella so frequently that dinner invitations from the Vatican became something powerful men in Rome genuinely feared. The papal court was supposed to be the center of Christendom. Instead, contemporary writers described it as a place where you checked your cup 3 times before drinking and still might not wake up the next morning. The show gives you a few dramatic poisoning scenes. The historical record, if even half the allegations are true, suggests the Borgias were running a Renaissance chemical weapons program out of the Vatican basement. Now let's talk about how Rodrigo became pope in the first place, because the show actually does cover the 1492 papal conclave, but it presents a somewhat sanitized version. In the series, you see political maneuvering, backroom deals, persuasion. It feels like a particularly cutthroat election. The reality was more like an auction. Contemporary accounts, including those from Johann Burchard, the papal master of ceremonies who kept meticulous diaries, describe Rodrigo Borgia essentially purchasing the papacy with a shopping list of bribes so specific and so brazen that it reads like a satirical sketch. Cardinal Sforza reportedly received 4 mule loads of silver delivered to his residence. 4 mule loads. Other cardinals received lucrative church positions, palaces, estates, and enormous cash payments. One cardinal allegedly received the entire city of Nepi. Rodrigo didn't whisper in shadowy corridors, he sent written contracts. He made binding deals with specific terms and delivery dates for the bribes. The Venetian ambassador wrote home, describing the conclave as the most shameful thing he had ever witnessed. and this was a Venetian diplomat in the 15th century. So his bar for shame was already astronomically high. Once Rodrigo became Alexander VI, the corruption didn't slow down. It accelerated. He openly acknowledged his illegitimate children, which previous popes had done quietly, if at all. He appointed his teenage son, Cesare, as a cardinal. Not through subtle influence, he just did it. Cesare was 17, had no serious theological training, and everyone knew he was the Pope's son. The Vatican under Alexander VI operated less like a religious institution and more like a family business with an army and a really good PR department. This is the part where the show was most obviously pulling its punches, and honestly, you can understand why. The alleged relationship between Cesare and Lucrezia Borgia is one of the most infamous accusations in European history. The Showtime series built toward it slowly, depicting an intense emotional bond that gradually crossed lines, but it remained relatively restrained. Suggestive. Implied more than shown, the historical allegations are not restrained at all. Giovanni Sforza, Lucrezia's first husband, publicly accused her of having sexual relationships with both her brother Cesare and her father, Pope Alexander. Now we need to be careful here because Sforza had every reason to slander the Borgias. His marriage to Lucrezia was annulled on the grounds of his alleged impotence, which was humiliating, and making wild accusations was his revenge. Many modern historians believe the incest allegations were politically motivated smears. But here's where it gets complicated. The accusations didn't come only from Sforza. Multiple contemporary sources repeated them. The poet Sannazaro wrote verses about it. The ambassador from Ferrara referenced it in diplomatic correspondence. And then there's the matter of the mysterious infans Romanus, a child born in 1498 whose parentage was officially attributed in two separate papal bulls. One bull said the child was Cesare's son. The other, kept secret, said the child was Alexander's. The mother was never officially identified, but many contemporaries pointed to Lucrezia. Two contradictory papal documents about the same child's father, with the leading candidate for the mother being the daughter and sister of the two men named. Whether or not the incest allegations were true, the Borgias created a situation so murky, so tangled, that even the official paperwork looks like a cover-up of something. The show touched on this. Reality belly flopped into it, and then there's the event that no television show has ever attempted to depict, and probably never will. On October 30th, 1501, according to Johann Burchard's diary, Cesare Borgia hosted what history remembers as the Banquet of Chestnuts at the Apostolic Palace. Burchard describes 50 courtesans invited to dine with the Pope and his children. After dinner, the women reportedly danced, first clothed, then not. Chestnuts were scattered on the floor, and the courtesans crawled on hands and knees to collect them, while the assembled guests watched. Then, according to Burchard, the evening escalated into something that cannot be described on YouTube without triggering every content filter in existence. But let's just say that prizes were awarded for, quote, athletic performance, and the Pope himself reportedly watched and kept score. This was in the Apostolic Palace, the seat of St. Peter, the symbolic heart of Catholic Christianity, and the Pope was handing out prizes. Now some historians question whether Burchard's account is exaggerated or even fabricated, but Burchard was generally considered a reliable and even boring chronicler. He was a bureaucrat, not a gossip columnist. His other entries are dry records of ceremonies and procedures. The Banquet of Chestnuts entry stands out precisely because it's so unlike everything else he wrote, which many scholars argue actually makes it more credible, not less. The Showtime series never touched this event. Not even close. Because how could they? If you put that scene in a television drama, audiences would assume the writers had lost their minds. So the next time someone tells you that historical dramas exaggerate the past for entertainment value, remember the Borgias. Remember that a premium cable network looked at the actual historical record of this family and said, no, we need to make them less evil or nobody will believe this. The Borgias are proof that sometimes reality doesn't just stranger than fiction. It's more depraved, more audacious, and more completely unhinged than any writer's room would dare to put on screen. Now I want to hear from you. What is the strangest, most jaw-dropping fact about the Borgias or any historical family that you've come across? Drop it in the comments because I genuinely want to read these. Every time I think I've found the most insane detail about this family, someone shows up with something worse. And if this is the kind of history deep dive you enjoy, you know where the subscribe button is. I'll see you in the next one.